Assemblymember Cook notices the absence of a quorum. Clerk will call the roll.
Ashajian, Alejo, Allen, Amiano, Atkins, Bell, Berryhill, Block, Blumenfield, Bonilla, Bradford, Brownlee, Buchanan, Butler, Calderon, Campos, Carter, Cedillo, Chesbro, Conway, Cook, Davis, Dickinson, Donnelly, Ing, Fuhr, Fletcher, Fong, Fuentes, Furutani, Galgiani, Garrick, Gatto, Gordon, Gorell, Grove, Hagman, Halderman, Hall, Harkey, Hayashi, Hernandez, Hill, Huber, Hueso, Huffman, Jeffries, Jones, Knight, Lara, Logue, Lowenthal, Ma, Mansour, Mendoza, Miller, Mitchell, Monning, Morrell, Nestande, Nilsson, Norby, Olson, Pan, Perea, V. Manuel Perez, Portantino, Silva, Skinner, Smythe, Solorio, Swanson, Torres, Valadeo, Wagner, Wykowski, Williams, Yamada. Mr. Speaker.
A quorum is present. We ask our guests and visitors in the rear of the chamber and in the gallery to please stand for the prayer. We ask our Assembly Chaplain, Father Pastor Ivan Williams, to offer the day's prayer.
Let us pray. Heavenly Father, as we gather today, we are reminded in nature of your showers of blessings and the beauty of buds and blossoms that only spring brings. May this season of change bring a new spirit, new energy, and new approaches to the work in this house. Let your people here in California see growth in our deliberations and grace in the decisions made here today. Bring about the aroma of collaboration and colors of cooperation and communication that can only make a better place for us to live. Thank you for the beautiful changes we see in nature. Now bless us to bless others with the change that will make a difference for the people here in this assembly as each person serves. In thy name we pray. Amen.
We ask our guests and visitors to remain standing and join us for the flag salute. Please join Assembly Member Carter as she leads us in the pledge. Ms. Carter.
Join me, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty, justice for all.
You may be seated. Reading of the previous day's journal.
Assembly Chamber, Sacramento, Thursday, April 14, 2011. Assembly minute 9 a.m. Honorable Mike Gatto, Assistant Speaker Pro Tem, Assembly of the Presiding Chief Clerk E. Dotson Wilson at the desk. Reading Clerk Timothy Moore. The reading. The roll was called. Ashajian, Alejo, Allen, Amiano, Atkins, Bell, Berryhill, Block, Blumenfield, Bonilla, Bradford, Brownlee, Buchanan, Calderon, Campos, Carter, Cedillo, Chesbrough, Cook, Davis, Dickinson, Donnelly, Ing, Fior, Fletcher, Fong, Fuentes, Furutani, Gatto, Gordon, Hagman, Halderman, Hall, Harkey, Hayashi, Hernandez, Hill, Huber,
Mr. Calderon moves. Mr. Hagman seconds that the reading of the previous day's journal be dispensed with. Presentations of petitions, there are none. Introduction and reference of bills will be deferred. Reports of committees will be deemed read and amendments deemed adopted. Messages from the governor, there are none. Messages from the Senate, there are none. Motions and resolutions. The absences for the day will be deemed read and printed in the journal. Mr. Allen, you are recognized.
Madam Speaker, I request unanimous consent to suspend Assembly Rule 45.5 to allow Assembly Members Davis to have guests and photographers on the floor.
Without objection.
I request unanimous consent to suspend Rule 1118 to allow Assembly Member Cook to have a guest at his desk and a photographer on the floor.
Without objection.
Request unanimous consent to suspend Assembly Rule 45.5 to allow Assembly Members Allen, Butler, Chesbrough, and Lowenthal to speak on adjourned memory today.
Without objection.
Madam Speaker, committee-to-committee re-referrals. AB 420 from the Public Safety Committee to Rules Committee.
Pursuant to Assembly Rule 96, that is referred without objection.
AB 921 from the Natural Resources Committee to the Rules Committee.
Without objection.
AB 1207 from the Jobs, Economic Development, and the Economy Committee to the Rules Committee.
Without objection.
AB 1217 to the Judiciary Committee only.
Without objection.
AB 1248 WASO from the Housing, Revenue, and Taxation Committee to the Rules Committee.
Without objection.
AB 1296 to the Health Committee.
Without objection.
Madam Chair, is it appropriate to do the file notice waiver at this point? No? Okay.
Okay, Colonel Cook, would you like to introduce your guest?
Yes, I would. It gives me a great deal of pleasure to introduce my... She never shuts up. It gives me a great deal of pleasure to introduce my spouse and my love of my life, Jeannie Cook.
Mr. Huffman?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have some guests. I have a sore throat, but I also have some guests in the gallery. Fourth and fifth graders from Sun Valley School, including my daughter Abby and my spouse and the love of my life, Susan. So welcome, everybody.
Mr. Wajkowski?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I, too, have some guests here, actually right in back of me in the gallery. I'm honored to introduce two terrific teachers from the 20th Assembly District, Edie and Tom Burbick. Edie's been a math teacher for 21 years, and Tom is in his 9th year as a social science teacher. They're joined today by another teacher from Hopkins Junior High School in Fremont, my significant other, Sue Lemke, with Luke Costello, our 13-year-old. Can you guys rise? These are exceptional instructors in our public education system, and they're serving the next generation of Californians. Thank you, Mrs. Speaker, Madam Speaker.
Business on the daily file, second reading. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 753, 195, 182, 631, 952 with amendments, 197, 240, 587, 46, 147, 561, 1050 with amendments, 851 with amendments, 1022 with amendments, 475 with amendments, 1406 with amendments, 687 with amendments, 971 with amendments, 135 with amendments, 525 with amendments, 565 with amendments, 768 with amendments, 541 with amendments, 894 with amendments, 1255 with amendments, 1410 with amendments, 1409 with amendments, and Senate Bill 66.
All bills will be deemed read and amendments deemed adopted. Okay, members, we're going to go to Assembly third reading. File item 34, AB 472. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 472 by Assembly Member Amiano, an act relating to controlled substances.
Mr. Amiano.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. Assembly Bill 472 seeks to address the needless overdose deaths that occur when witnesses to an overdose hesitate to contact emergency services because they fear arrest for themselves or for the overdose victim. California has one of the highest numbers of overdose deaths in the country, with 3,646 deaths from drug and alcohol overdose in 2006 alone. This equates to 10 people dying every day from overdose in California. Numerous research studies have shown that the fear of arrest and incarceration among witnesses is the leading cause for delay or failure to seek emergency medical care. If appropriate medical care is received in a timely manner, many drug-related deaths can be prevented. Existing law discourages people from calling emergency services in these emergency situations. AB 472 provides limited criminal immunity to individuals for only being under the influence or minor possession of drugs for personal use or possession of drug paraphernalia if they seek medical attention to save the life of someone experiencing a drug overdose. This bill does not protect people from prosecution for other offenses, including the trafficking of drugs or driving under the influence, and this bill prohibits obstruction of medical or law enforcement personnel. A person should not fear calling 911. Instead, everyone should be ready and willing to call 911 to save a life. I ask for your aye vote.
Mr. Norby.
I rise in strong support of this bill. It's a common sense measure. A good Samaritan, regardless of his personal circumstances, should not help someone and fear punishment himself. This bill will save lives, and it only extends the protections we gave last year to those with regards to alcohol. I support it.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. 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 Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 42, noes 22. Measure passes. File item 38, AB 207. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 207 by Assemblymember Amiano, an act relating to school attendance.
Mr. Amiano.
Thank you, Madam Clerk and members. AB 207 seeks to improve access to education by clarifying the specific documents that may constitute evidence of a residency in a K-12 district. Existing law only specifies a range of documents that we can use to meet residency requirements for school districts adjacent to the international border. Therefore, most school districts are not currently provided with specific guidelines on how to verify residency. As a result, some school districts are imposing overly burdensome requirements on families that may experience difficulty improving documents or providing them to establish residency within a school district. AB 207 provides clear guidelines to all school districts by identifying specific documents. The bill seeks to eliminate discriminatory barriers to school enrollment and allows all of California's children to have equal access to education. I ask for an aye vote.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 41, noes 18. Measure passes. File item 43, AB 44. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 44 by Assemblymember Logue, an act relating to inmates.
Mr. Logue.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Today I present AB 44, which is jointly authored by Assemblywoman Galgiani. This bill addresses a problem that arose in my district when a convicted serial killer was released into Lassen County on short notice. It caused a great deal of worry and unease in my district. AB 44 would require CDCR to notify counties as soon as a parole date is set so that the local law enforcement can prepare for the release of a violent felon. Cost for this bill is minimal. There is no opposition and has received no votes. I respectfully request your aye vote. Thank you.
Ms. Galgiani.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Mr. Logue. This bill is extremely important. As he mentioned initially, Lauren Herzog was to be released into my county. We had more than 80 witnesses that testified against Lauren Herzog and Wesley Shermantine, who were originally charged with 6 murders and believed to have committed up to 22 more. This was a true miscarriage of justice in this instance. But it was very important that the Department of Corrections have the ability and the tools to work with communities and be respectful of victims and witnesses in the process, so that Lauren Herzog was not placed among his victims and witnesses in our county, in our area. This is one case, but there are many like it, I'm sure, throughout the state. So this is one tool that will be provided to the Department of Corrections that will be helpful and will help protect victims and witnesses in similar circumstances.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 66, no 0. Measure passes. File item 46, AB 324. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 324 by Assembly Member Buchanan and others, an act relating to state buildings.
Ms. Buchanan.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. AB 324 will help alleviate traffic congestion and greenhouse gas emissions in California by requiring the Department of General Services to consider additional factors when selecting the location of a new state building in excess of 10,000 square feet. These factors include the location of the community or population served by the state building, the residential location of the workforce to be housed in the building. Priority may be given to the highest reduction of miles traveled by its workforce and the highest reduction of traffic congestion, and the availability and proximity of high quality and frequent transit service. This bill is supported by both business and labor and has no opposition. I urge your aye vote.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 43, noes 19. Measure passes. File item 48, ACR 26. Clerk will read.
Assembly concurrent resolution 26 by Assembly Member Galgiani relative to chronic obstructive pulmonary disease.
Ms. Galgiani.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. COPD is a condition that impacts an estimated 24 million Americans each year and nearly 1.6 million Californians. COPD, which includes chronic bronchitis and emphysema, is predicted to be the third leading cause of death by the year 2020. Nationally, COPD kills more than 125,000 Americans each year, and that equals one death every 4 minutes. In 2006, California's Office of Statewide Health Planning and Development reported over 46,000 hospital discharges associated with COPD. Early diagnosis and management is critical and can effectively reduce the financial burden of this illness on publicly funded programs like Medi-Cal. Additionally, ACR declares November 2011 as COPD Awareness Month. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Okay, we can take a voice vote on this item. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The measure is adopted. File item 50, AB 307. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 307 by Assembly Member Nastandi, an act relating to joint powers agreements.
Mr. Nastandi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. AB 307 will include California tribal governments among the public entities eligible to participate in a joint powers authority with other state and local government entities. Typically, JPAs are formed to provide services such as sewer and water reclamation, regional traffic and development planning, community libraries, and self-insurance pooling. Today, many tribal governments have the resources and sophistication to engage in large-scale economic developments, infrastructure construction, and broad-based community services beyond their tribal membership. It is now time to recognize California tribal governments as equal partners in progress. This measure has no opposition and passed the Assembly Local Government Committee with a 9-0 vote. I ask for your aye vote.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 55, no 0. Measure passes. File item 53, AJR 4. Clerk will read.
Assembly Joint Resolution 4 by Assembly Member Miller relative to Transportation Infrastructure Finance and Innovation Act.
Mr. Miller.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. AJ4 is an important resolution that calls upon the President of the United States and the Secretary of the United States Department of Transportation to award a Federal Transportation Infrastructure Financing Innovation Act, or TIFIA, loan guarantee for the State Route 91 Corridor Improvement Project. Last year, I introduced AB 2098, co-authored by our chair and vice chair, and enjoyed 51 co-authors before signed by the governor. It authorized the Riverside County Transportation Commission to develop the State Route 91 Corridor Improvement Project, the largest single construction project in California in the last 25 years. RCTC has already invested $1 billion in this project, which is otherwise purely locally funded. A low-interest guaranteed TIFIA loan will enable RCTC to obtain the more than $400 million in private financing necessary to complete the 6-lane highway expansion along the 14-mile stretch of the State Route 91 and the 6-mile stretch along Interstate 15. Federal loan guarantees are leveraged through bond sales and existing local sales tax. A TIFIA loan is vital, and it will enable RCTC to follow through in the creation of more than 18,000 California job opportunities in an area impacted by double-digit unemployment rates. 2 weeks ago, AJR passed out of Assembly Transportation Committee without any no votes. I'm proud to have both the chair and the vice chair, Ms. Lowenthal, Mr. Jeffries, as co-authors. I'm asking for your aye vote. Thank you.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 61, no 0. Measure passes. File item 54, AB 456. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 456 by Assemblymember Wagner, an act relating to arbitration.
Mr. Wagner.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I rise to request colleagues' support on AB 456. This makes a small amendment to the Code of Civil Procedure. Currently, Code of Civil Procedure, Section 1281.5, when there is to be a construction dispute that is to go to arbitration, requires the court intervene in cases of mechanics liens. What this does is fixes an oversight in drafting of that statute from a couple of years ago and takes the courts out of the process so that we have a much simpler and more streamlined arbitration and dealings with mechanics liens situation. I urge your aye vote. This matter has no opposition. Thank you.
Ms. Harkey.
Question of the author.
Without objection.
Mr. Wagner, is this your first bill?
Well, actually, Ms. Harkey, I've had lots of bills.
But is this your first bill on the floor?
I pay them mostly on time. A friend named Willard, we call him Bill, a brother Bill. Does all of that count?
Members, I'd appreciate a little help in this endeavor.
This would be my first bill on this floor, Ms. Harkey.
Thank you. How long, then the next question would be, how long did it take you to find something so minuscule?
Ms. Harkey, you haven't looked at my bill package. I've got a lot of minuscule things. As a lawyer, I've been dealing with minuscule little problems for years.
Ms. Conway.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Mr. Wagner, I just have one concern in reading the support on your bill. It seems you are supported by the flashers of some sort, and so I just was hoping for a clarification that if you are supported by the flashers and if they are part of this legislation.
Well, Ms. Conway, the flashers are particularly worried about small things, and so minuscule things. So they got behind this bill.
All right, I thank you for that clarification.
Mr. Jeffries.
This bill deals with mechanics. I'm wondering, what do you have against mechanics?
Mr. Wagner.
Mechanics liens. My problem is, when the mechanic isn't working, he's just kind of leaning against your car. So this deals with mechanics liens, Mr. Jeffries.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 61, no 0. Measure passes. File item 57, AB 220 on the amendments. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 220 with amendments by Assemblymember Solorio.
Mr. Solorio.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. This is a bill regarding the Governor's Office of Gang and Youth Violence Policy. Today I'm recommending we add co-authors to the bill. Ask for your aye vote on these amendments.
Seeing and hearing no objections, we can take a voice vote on the amendments. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The amendments are adopted. Out to print and back on file. File item 63, AB 1343. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1343 by Assemblymember Fong, an act relating to vote by mail procedures.
Mr. Fong.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. Since 2002, when state law was changed to allow any voter to become a permanent vote by mail voter, the number of Californians who are permanent vote by mail voters has shot up. As a result, more than 3 out of every 8 registered voters in California are now signed up as permanent vote by mail voters. Under existing law, a voter may be removed from the permanent vote by mail voter list if she or he fails to return a ballot in 2 consecutive statewide general elections. As a result, some voters could be prevented from voting if they don't realize their names have been deleted from the list of permanent vote by mail voters. AB 1343 allows voters to maintain their desired status as permanent vote by mail voters by providing that a voter's name will be removed from the list of permanent vote by mail voters only if he or she fails to vote in 4 consecutive statewide general elections. I respectfully request your aye vote.
Mr. Logue.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in opposition. AB 1343 takes us in the wrong direction. This bill would increase the chances of fraud in the absence of voting. Missing a couple elections is understandable, but failing to vote in 4 consecutive statewide elections usually indicates that the voter has either moved or died. I respectfully request your no vote on this measure. Thank you.
Seeing no further questions or debate, Mr. Fong, you may close.
The voter file maintenance will be intact, and if you are moved, they will delete you from the file. And so I request an aye vote.
Clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 46, noes 25. Measure passes. Members, we're going to return to motions and resolutions. Mr. Speaker.
Members, I rise to introduce one of California's most famous chefs and kind of a big personality, too, Guy Fieri. Mr. Fieri is known for his shows on NBC and the Food Network, notably Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives, as well as opening a number of popular restaurants, including Johnny's Garlics and Tex Wasabi. Mr. Fieri is visiting the Capitol in recognition of Cooking with Your Kids Day, which seeks to encourage parents to involve their children in preparing family meals to help instill healthy eating habits in children. Please join me in welcoming Chef Guy Fieri.
Okay, members, we have some more guests here today. Ms. Skinner.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, I'd like to introduce the Pacific Choir Academy of Oakland, who is here today to visit us, and they're in the balcony, gallery. Yes, say hello. Thank you for joining us.
Okay, members, we're going to go back to business on the daily file. File item 64, AB 86. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 86 by Assemblymember Mendoza, an act relating to charter schools.
Mr. Mendoza.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, I'm here to present AB 86, which will create parity for classified employees when charter schools are established. AB 86 requires that at least one half of permanent classified employees estimated to work at a charter school to sign a petition to start a new school or to convert an existing school into a charter school. Classified employees play an important role in our education system by assisting with special education classes, English learners, and a variety of other essential duties. This bill, thank you, Madam Speaker. It is clear that the creation of a charter school will impact classified employees, and I believe that they should be given a voice in the process and a seat at the table. Members, I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 43, noes 22. Measure passes. File item 66, AB 227. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 227 by Assemblymember Hall and others, an act relating to education.
Mr. Hall.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. AB 227 takes a proactive approach to fight cyberbullying and protect the students using the internet in California schools. We've all heard on many instances and occasions where such abuse has caused students in schools to commit suicide, oftentimes have their lives placed in jeopardy by individuals who just don't respect the internet. This measure requires a school district seeking state or federal education technology grants to do three things. One, to use content control software on school computers to establish secure guidelines to prevent cyberbullying and inform students on the consequences of cyberbullying, and also to inform students of the appropriate and responsible use of mobile communication technology in schools. It's a very simple bill to help protect students in our schools and to make sure that we do the very thing and the very best we can as our students are using the internet. Again, I respectfully ask for your aye votes, and there is no opposition to this measure, with the exception of perhaps maybe just one member.
Mr. Norby.
That member.
Well, if I can use a bully pulpit without violating this bill to oppose it, that's what I'm going to do. Keeping kids safe at school is a basic function of state and local government. I know my good friend and colleague believes in that as strong as I do. But fanning unjustified fears is not a way to keep kids safe. Fanning fears of the internet, fanning fears of rising crime rates when in fact they're falling, fanning fears of student violence when in fact student violence rates nationwide have been falling, citing tragic suicides, yes, when in fact the youth suicide rate is actually down by 25% since the 1990s, is not a way to keep our schools safe. And in fact, those that believe in public education and want the public to support it should be wary of bills such as this and many others that fan fears of unjustified so-called crime increases and threats which really aren't there. Extending the long arm of the law into the internet is not a way to control bullying. We have laws against assault. We have laws against people beating each other of any age without something like this. I'm quoting here, if I may read, Madam Chair, from the Department of Education booklet entitled Bullying at School, which defines bullying as taunting, malicious teasing, name-calling, threatening, manipulating relationships, promoting exclusion, spreading rumors. We've probably all been guilty of this in hit pieces we typically use in campaigns. And to put the long arm of the law into something which, in fact, fans unjustified fears is not a way to keep kids safe or to build public support for public schools.
Seeing no further questions or debate, Mr. Hall, you may close.
Yes, as I sit here in this chamber and I saw all the students in the gallery and here in the Capitol, my heart hurts knowing that these students, while we're talking about fanning, go to school each and every day. And we have a moral responsibility to protect these kids, at least reasonably. And I understand Mr. Norby, and I understand some antiquated thought theory. However, I see all the time on the news, read in the papers, of kids committing suicide, being injured mentally and physically as a result of individuals just taking advantage of the internet by way of cyberbullying. We have a responsibility not just to advocate for the adults of California, and I don't know, and quite certainly I'm not really sure of what Mr. Norby is saying in mail pieces, but I was told when you're a child, you act like a child, but when you're adult, you put away your childish ways. I will respectfully ask for your aye vote for the people of the state of California, the children that are participating and going to school each and every day in our public school system. Thank you.
Clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 49, noes 19. Measure passes. File item 68, AB 301. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 301 by Assemblymember Pan and Act relating to Medi-Cal.
Mr. Pan.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, I'm asking for your support for AB 301, which is a simple but critical measure to extend the carve-out for the California Children's Services Program, which provides specialty care to children with significant illness from carve-out from managed care. Basically, this is a program that's been around in California for a very long time to ensure that children can get access to pediatric specialists no matter where in the state they live. It's a program that has proven its effectiveness in terms of ensuring that children who have critical illnesses like cancer can be sure they get the care that they need. We are currently in a process where there's going to be several pilot programs to look at the best approaches, provide care, and this bill basically extends the existing carve-out for a period of time until the pilots can be completed and evaluation can be done. So I certainly ask for your aye vote. Thank you.
Mr. Logue?
Yeah, thank you. I want to commend Assemblymember Pan for this bill, AB 301. We support it wholeheartedly, and thank you very much.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 71, noes 0. Measure passes. File item 71, AB 390. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 390 by Assemblymember Portantino and Act relating to vehicles.
Mr. Portantino.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. AB 390 seeks to help those who are of limited vision or who cannot see have an opportunity to renew their ID cards with a proper notification from the Department of Motor Vehicles. It has bipartisan support, and I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 67, noes 0. Measure passes. File item 74, AB 648. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 648 by Assemblymember Block and Act relating to clemency.
Mr. Block.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The governor's ability to pardon or commute sentences is firmly rooted in our constitutional structure of checks and balances. As the leader of the executive branch, it's expected that he or she will exercise that constitutional right from time to time. AB 648 does not interfere with the governor's constitutional authority with respect to commutations. AB 648 simply requires that an applicant for a commutation notify the district attorney of the county where the conviction occurred of their intent to apply for a commutation of sentence 30 days before the governor acts. The district attorney would then be required to notify the victim and their family. This provides the opportunity for the victims and the district attorney to make a recommendation as to whether they support or oppose the application for commutation of sentence. AB 648 is about notification and making sure that all parties have the opportunity to voice their concern over a potential change in sentencing. AB 648 also requires the governor to file a written report with the legislature regarding each reprieve, pardon, or commutation that he or she granted. This report would also be available to the public. The bill is sponsored by the San Diego District Attorney, Bonnie Dumanis. It's supported by the California DA's Association, the San Diego County Board of Supervisors, San Diego County Police Chiefs and Sheriff's Association, the LA County Professional Police Officers Association, the California Police Chiefs Association, the California Fraternal Order of Police, and Crime Victims United. It is jointly authored by Assemblyman Fletcher, and as it's worked its way through the process, this bill has not had any no votes. I urge your aye vote.
Mr. Fletcher.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, this is just a simple effort in coordination with law enforcement to ensure that those who prosecute the crimes and the victims of crimes have a chance to weigh in the commutation process. And I appreciate all those who are in support and my joint author, Mr. Block, and request your aye vote.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Aye 61, no 0. Measure passes. File item 75, AB 651. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 651 by Assemblymember Hueso, an act relating to elections.
Mr. Hueso.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. AB 651 requires professional petition gathering firms to register with the Secretary of State's office and ensures that the residents of California can access information about professional petition gathering firms on the Secretary of State's website. It also requires that professional petition gatherers educate their petition gatherers about the relevant election laws to make sure that they are aware of the laws governing the solicitation of signatures. We have very little information about petition gathering firms, and we are currently unable to verify whether paid signature gatherers are provided with information on the laws that regulate petition gathering. The bill is supported by the Secretary of State and will help decrease fraud and illegal practices in the signature gathering process. Thank you.
Mr. Logue.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. AB 651 is a deceptive attack on grassroots voter organizations. California has a long history of voter initiative drives. This is something we should celebrate, not discourage. This bill goes against the will of the people who passed Prop 13 and Jessica's Law. I respectfully request your no vote on this measure.
Ms. Grove.
Madam Speaker, it bears repeating that the initiative process is a fundamental right reserved by the people under our Constitution, and it is not a right guaranteed by the state. So I would ask for a no vote and not undermine the people that are protected by our Constitution.
Mr. Jeffries.
Question for the author. I'm not sure if that was just addressed.
Without objection.
Do you know, will this impact the ability to do a referendum if the public wants to do a referendum on something that passes out of the legislature?
Absolutely not. This only gets to paid petition gatherers and providing information for the public. It's a transparency measure. It doesn't get to volunteers. Volunteers can work without necessarily registering as if they're volunteers. But if a firm is paying somebody, they're actually paying them to gather signatures. Often there is an incentive to gather a signature more than there is to inform the public about a measure that's going on the ballot. It's imperative that we educate the public about what they're signing. It's imperative that they can access information about a very complex document that they're signing. These documents are very complex legal documents that often takes a significant amount of review to fully understand. So it only gets to the process, which is if somebody's going to pay somebody, at least the public deserves to know that this initiative is being paid for
by someone.
I guess, Madam Speaker, on my own time, I'm not being a constitutionalist and lawyer on issues like this. My curiosity to the members here today, if someone is going to utilize the constitutional process to do a referendum on legislation that is enacted by this body and signed by the governor, if there is any mechanism that this is going to hinder their ability, and I don't know if doing a referendum will qualify under the terms described in this bill to be considered a petition or a paid signature drive, then in effect, if it did, it would have the adverse impact or adverse effect on discouraging or hindering the ability of the citizens to circulate and process a referendum by virtue of forcing an organization to go through the Secretary of State to get the license and the permits, and that, I think, would cause a constitutional challenge. I don't know if that's the case. I just raise that as something that should be considered further as this bill moves forward, assuming it does.
Seeing no further questions or debate, Mr. Hueso, you may close.
Thank you, and I urge an aye vote on this measure. This is a transparency measure that will encourage the education of the public, so I hope I can count on your support. Thank you.
Clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 46, noes 22. Measure passes. File item 77, AB 708. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 708 by Assemblymember Knight, an act relating to crimes.
Mr. Knight.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, AB 708 will provide district attorneys the tools they need to properly prosecute criminals by providing that a criminal complaint may be filed within 1 year of the date of discovery from a recording device, not the actual date of crime. AB 708 is a minor amendment to the Penal Code that will have a profound impact upon improving and protecting the privacy of individuals. I ask for aye vote.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 67, no 0. Measure passes. Mr. Calderon.
Yes, Madam Speaker, request unanimous consent to return to motions and resolutions.
Without objection.
I have two motions. Pursuant to Assembly Rule 96, I request unanimous consent to refer AB 1208 from the Accountability Administration Review Committee to the Judiciary Committee.
Without objection.
And also, pursuant to Rule 62, request unanimous consent to waive the file notice requirements on Assembly Bill 56 to allow Housing and Community Development Committee to hear AB 697 by Mr. Perez and AB 931 by Mr. Dickinson on Wednesday, April 27 at 9 a.m. in room 126, pending re-referral from Veteran Affairs Committee and the Natural Resources Committee, which we've already done.
Without objection. Okay, we're going to go back to file item 83, ACR 47. Clerk will read.
Assembly concur Resolution 47 relative to the 50th anniversary of service by African American justices in the California courts.
Mr. Davis, you may open on the measure.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker and members of the California State Assembly. Today I rise to join friends of ours over in the courts of California, Ronald Overholt, who is the Chief Deputy Director, and William Vickney, who is the Administrative Director of the courts. Today is not African American History Month in particular, but in general it is an accomplishment historically of the state of California. As we often honor legislative accomplishments and we honor executive accomplishments, today we are equally proud to call specific attention to the accomplishments of the courts of California. We know the history in this country of African Americans, and California has recognized and has had some hallmark accomplishment that the court will be celebrating this year, and we join our friends in that effort. We will be celebrating the 50-year anniversary of African Americans involved in the state courts of California, both the appellate and Supreme Courts. Today we have with us the Honorable Justices Vance Ray, Candace Cooper, Jeffrey Johnson, William Murray Jr., and Carol Codrington. It is equally important that we have the founder, or the person who first started the diversity of involvement of African Americans in California's court, the Honorable Edwin Jefferson. His daughter is here, Susan Jefferson, and grandson, Tay Norwood, the great-grandson, rather, of the Honorable Edwin Jefferson, who in 1961 became California's first appellate court justice. Additionally, we have Odessa Brazard, and we have Gloria Thompson. And observing today's presentation, representing those from the legal community, is Superior Court Judge Patricia Titus, who's here with us today. We have some of the State Assembly's brightest attorneys who have asked to speak and to comment on this particular issue of diversity in our courts. I will say in summary that as we look at who African Americans are in the state of California, some 6.2% of the population, yet more than 3 times their population in our criminal justice system today. Diversity becomes not only a philosophy, it becomes important to have integration at every level of government. Not only can we have the involvement of different cultures on the back end of the criminal justice system, but it is important, and California sends the message today, that we need to have leadership on the top executive and judicial points of our government's judicial system. And so today, Madam Speaker and members, I rise with the greatest of honor and pride on the diversity that we have accomplished in joining with the officers of the Court of California in this awesome celebration.
Mr. Alejo.
Madam Speaker and members, I rise to also honor these fine and exemplary judges here in our California courts, and I think it's imperative that we celebrate the histories of African Americans and other people of color, not only during a particular month, but also throughout the year here in the state legislature. And as a former legal aid attorney and a former staff attorney with the Monterey County Superior Court, I wanted to rise and thank Assemblymember Davis for introducing ACR 47. And it's the leaders in the courts that have molded and shaped the civil rights advancements for all people of color, but also ensured justice in our courts for all people throughout the state of California. There's a long and proud history of African American lawyers and judges throughout our nation's history and into the present, including here in our own state courts. And I'm sure that we've all heard of Thurgood Marshall as a man arguing before the U.S. Supreme Court and winning the landmark victory in Brown versus Board of Education in 1954. But many do not remember his role in a case that challenged racial segregation in Orange County schools here in our own state 9 years before Brown versus Board of Education. Thurgood Marshall wrote the amicus brief, the friend of the court brief, in support of abolishing Mexican schools here in California in 1946 in Mendez versus Westminster. Marshall went on to become the first African-American U.S. Supreme Court Justice in 1967, and he was known to be called the Great Dissenter. But this vision to abolish the separate but equal, established in Plessy versus Ferguson, actually began decades before that with a distinguished attorney, Charles Houston, out of Howard Law School, who not only played a significant role in dismantling Jim Crow laws, but also trained a cadre of young African-American lawyers, including Thurgood Marshall, to lay the groundwork and set the precedent that would eventually be used to strike down separate but equal doctrine in the Brown case. Other great lawyers have come about through that effort, lawyers including Oliver Hill, Robert Carter, James Nabritt, and many others, but also those that were close and that were heroes to me, like Medgar Evers, a young aspiring lawyer who was denied admission to the University of Mississippi Law School, Charles Ray, who became the first African-American lawyer in our country's history in 1872 and who had to close down her practice because not being able to get enough clients to have her practice continue. Marcus Allen, the first African-American lawyer in 1844. And it's these great names that we have to recognize and honor as setting the groundwork, being the giants that came before us that also impacted the Latino community. I acknowledge all the work of the NAACP and many civil rights leaders who fought to pass the 1965 Voting Rights Act that also was used decades later to empower Latinos throughout the Southwest. This very act was used to strike down at-large discriminatory election systems and resulted in electing the first Latino judges in Monterey County in my district. And I just wanted to stand here today to acknowledge and to thank these many great African-American lawyers and judges who continue to have a rich tradition here in our country's history and who laid the groundwork for young Latino lawyers for me as well. And I want to applaud these fine judges who are here, and I encourage and applaud everyone to acknowledge their great efforts in our California courts as well. Thank you.
Mr. Huffman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of this important measure. And despite the way the legal profession is often portrayed and perceived in our society, I'm very proud to be part of the legal profession. And one of the reasons is that for decades, in fact, for my entire lifetime, African-American jurists have been an integral part of our system of justice. It is so important and fitting that that is the case because the African-American experience is such an important part of the American experience and the California experience. By bringing the diversity and breadth of experience to our system of justice, these honorees are making the practice of law and the work of the judiciary more accessible and fair to the people of our state. So to our honorees, I want to thank you and also those who paved the way for you for everything that you have contributed. And to Mr. Davis, thank you so much for bringing this important measure.
Mr. Wachowski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I, too, rise in support of this resolution, acknowledging the service and contributions of African-American justices in the state of California. These individuals, recognized in this resolution, are true trailblazers, whose careers open the doors for other African-Americans in our judicial system. It is critical that our three branches of government reflect the diversity and population of our state as much as possible. People's trust and faith in government is enhanced when that government mirrors its society. But these pioneers are not only important for breaking down barriers, they are worthy of recognition because so many other African Americans and people of other races that they inspire. They gave hope to others and allowed them to dream that they too could have a career in our judicial branch. I am pleased to join the author, Mr. Davis, in the recognition of the role these leaders have played in increasing diversity in California's court, and I support the resolution.
Mr. Monning.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I also want to thank Mr. Davis for bringing this to our floor, and particularly to welcome the justices and judges and family members who join us today for this recognition. As I'm sure you would be the first to acknowledge, you represent so many others upon whose shoulders you stand. I think as a practicing attorney, as a former attorney with the United Farmworkers Union and the California Rural Legal Assistants, diversity in our judicial system is essential. And it's essential not only in the composition of juries, not only in the composition of those who represent defendants or litigants in our courts, but it's particularly important for those that access our court system to see that diversity reflected on the bench. You have distinguished careers fulfilling that pledge and that oath. You've meted out justice, I know in very difficult circumstances sometimes. Perhaps your greatest inspiration is to those young people determining where they might best make a contribution to our communities and to our state, to realize that to aspire to a position on the bench is not beyond their reach. I thank you for your contributions. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Mr. Davis.
Ms. Carter.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, I rise to support Mr. Davis's ACR 47. Justice Jefferson was California's first African-American judge in 1941, and he opened the door for other historic appointments of African-Americans serving in our California courts in the last 50 years. Out of 105 appellate court judges in California, only 6 African Americans are currently serving. Out of those 6 distinguished justices, there is 1 woman from the Inland Empire, Associate Judge Carol Coddington from Riverside, California, and so I especially want to welcome you to the Capitol today. Today, as we celebrate the contribution and diversity of our judicial representatives, it is important to pay tribute to all of these men and women by also encouraging and supporting continued and increased diversity in our judicial system. I respectfully ask all of you to support ACR 47.
Mr. Bradford.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I, too, rise in support of ACR 47 and to recognize the work of Mr. Davis, the Legislative Black Caucus, but more importantly, the work of this Assembly body for recognizing the contributions of African Americans in our court system here, not only today, but throughout the history of California. As it's been stated, we are celebrating 50 years of service by African Americans on the appellate court, but also recognizing 70 years of service by Judge Jefferson, who was the first African American to serve here in the state of California. As we look across the state and we look across the nation and at the progress that we have seen and made, it's not solely through legislation that we do on this floor. It's through the work of judges that we are honoring here today. They have truly been the social engineers of change in this state and this nation, so I commend them for their hard work, and I'm here to celebrate them today. Thank you very much.
Mr. Swanson.
Madam Speaker, thank you. I rise also to commend Mr. Davis and this resolution. And I wanted to say very briefly thank you to our jurists. Thank you for your role model that you provide our young people and for the sensitivity that you've shown our young people over the years. I think that if anyone follows your career or find themselves in your courtroom, they will know that once a young person has made a mistake, and they show up there, they find a great deal of sensitivity and care in an attempt to try to put them on the right track. Thank you for that and for all the lives that you have turned around and moved in the right direction, and I ask for the aye vote.
Mr. Davis, would you like to close?
Yes, I would. Madam Speaker and members, I have to tell you today is a proud moment for me, not only because we are joining in California's courts to honor this milestone in the institution of California's judiciary, but particularly because we've had some of the most brilliant lawyers of our own body that I have the highest regard for, not only because of their skill as lawyers, but because they practice diversity themselves. And that's why they specifically were chosen to give comments on this issue of celebrating the milestone of 50 years of African American involvement in California's courts. We know that as they have each spoken, that the reason why this is important, because to follow will be the increase of representation of other cultures that also are African American in the future. My heart is warmed by your presentation. I'm eternally grateful for your remarks today, and I look forward to continuing to work with you as we all celebrate the 50th anniversary of African Americans in California's courts. And I ask for your aye vote.
Mr. Davis, would you like co-authors on this measure?
Yes, ma'am, I would.
Okay. Mr. Davis is asking for co-authors on ACR 47. The clerk will open the roll. This is for co-authors, members, for co-authors. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. For the record, there are 58 co-authors. We can take a voice vote on this item. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The measure is adopted. Okay, members, we will now move to the special ceremony to commemorate the 50th anniversary of African Americans on the appellate courts, and Ms. Mitchell will be presiding. Ms. Mitchell.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Colleagues, while you adjourn to the back to take pictures, we would like to thank Justice Edwin Jefferson's family and Associate Justice Leon Thompson's family for joining us today. I'd like to ask members of the Legislative Black Caucus to retire to the rear of the chambers to serve as an escort committee for the appellate justices who have joined us today. Mr. Fuhr, would you mind joining the Black Caucus as chair of the Judiciary Committee as a part of the escort committee? Members, you've heard a great deal of history from Mr. Davis and all those who spoke on behalf of the resolution. Let me just say that over the past 50-year period, 14 justices of African American descent have served on the California's appellate court. One justice, John Miller, was a former member of this very House before his appointment to the First Appellate District by Governor Jerry Brown in 1978. And of course, the 5 justices who are either retired or currently serving are here with us today to be recognized and honored. Let me ask the escort committee to please escort the 5 justices to the front of the chamber. May I have the members of the escort committee please escort the 5 justices to the front of the chamber. Legislative Black Caucus, as well as Judiciary Committee Chair, Mr. Fuhrer. If you could bring them forward. Vance W. Ray was appointed Presiding Justice of the California Court of Appeal, 3rd Appellate District in Sacramento in 2010 by former Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger. The Honorable Candace Cooper served as the Presiding Justice of the 2nd Appellate District, Division 8, until her retirement in 2008. She was first appointed to the Los Angeles Municipal Court by Edmund G. Brown in 1980. Associate Justice Jeffrey Johnson assumed office in 2009 in the Court of Appeals, 2nd Appellate District, District 1, Los Angeles. The Honorable William Murray, Jr. was appointed to the Superior Court of San Joaquin County in 1995 by former Governor Pete Wilson. Justice Murray was appointed to the California Court of Appeal, 3rd Appellate District in 2010 by former Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger, becoming only the 3rd jurist and the first African American from San Joaquin County to serve in the 3rd Appellate District in the history of that county. The Honorable Carol Codrington, an Associate Justice of the California Court of Appeal, 4th Appellate District in Riverside County. Justice Codrington is the only African-American woman currently serving as a justice anywhere in the state of California. And while we are continuing to take photos of the justices who are able to join us today, let us please acknowledge those who weren't able to come. Presiding Justice Arley Maddox Woods, Los Angeles, retired. Presiding Justice Vano Spencer, 2nd Appellate District, LA, retired. Former Supreme Court and Court of Appeal Associate Justice Janice Rogers Brown. Associate Justice Henry E. Needham, Jr. Associate Justice Martin J. Jenkins, San Francisco. Members, please join me in congratulating all of these esteemed justices on their service to the state of California. Members, we invite you to join the Legislative Black Caucus and the justices and their families for a reception in the Senate President Pro Tem's conference room, 211, upon adjournment of session. Thank you so much, and this concludes our ceremony.
Mr. Calderon.
Madam Speaker, members, under motions and resolutions,
Without objection.
I would request unanimous consent to refer AB 404 by Mr. Gatto from the Appropriations Committee to the Rules Committee.
Without objection.
Also request unanimous consent to withdraw AB 64 by Mr. Jeffries from the Appropriations Committee and order the bill to second reading.
Without objection. Mr. Calderon, I believe there's one other one, AB 1208. Okay, members, we are at the second day consent calendar. Does any member wish to remove an item from the second day consent calendar? Seeing and hearing none, the clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 143 by Assembly Member Fuentes, an act relating to pupil records.
Clerk will open the roll on the consent calendar. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 55, no 0.
Assembly Bill 238.
Ayes 55, no 0.
Assembly Bill 1133.
Ayes 55, no 0.
And Assembly Bill 858.
Ayes 55, no 0. The consent calendar is adopted. We will move to adjourn in memories. The following members were approved to present their adjourn in memories: Mr. Allen and Chesbro, Ms. Butler, Ms. Lowenthal, and Speaker Perez. Mr. Chesbro.
Yes, members, on Thursday, last Thursday, Jess Stonestreet Jackson Winery. Could you guys, thank you. Let me start over here. Last Thursday, Jess Stonestreet Jackson, winery founder, visionary, and true Renaissance man, died at his home in Geyserville in my district after a long and courageous battle with cancer. He was 81 years old. Jess Jackson was born and raised in San Francisco, and I might parenthetically tell you, a good friend of our friend John Burton actually went to high school and college with him. During the Great Depression, which John maybe wouldn't have had you let me let you know that he went to high school that long ago, being raised during the Great Depression likely helped form his toughness and intense work ethic that he exhibited later in life as an adult. He graduated from UC Bolt Hall Law School, supporting himself by working in San Francisco at the docks and as a Berkeley policeman. Jess and his family bought an 80-acre pear and walnut orchard in Lakeport in Lake County in 1974 that he eventually converted to a vineyard and started the now famous Kendall Jackson wine business. In 1982, he produced his first bottle of wine under the Kendall Jackson label. The wine he produced won the first double platinum award ever presented by the American Wine Competition. Sales took off, and Jess quickly made the transition from gentleman farmer and attorney to wine industry tycoon. Using his skills as a land use attorney, Jess expanded the Lakeport holdings to what eventually became a 14,000-acre empire of coastal vineyards stretching from Santa Barbara to Mendocino. Jess Jackson's vision and outspoken manner often ran counter to conventional industry practices. Never being a man to settle for anything less than the best, he realized the quality of the French oak barrels used to age his wine was inconsistent, so he decided to invest in his own mill in France to provide barrels. He was a leader in the sustainable farming movement within the wine industry, implementing dozens of environmentally friendly farming innovations throughout the vineyards of Jackson family wines. Jess's passion for farming and horses led him later in life to thoroughbred breeding and racing. As a philanthropist, he and his wife, Barbara Banke, quietly donated millions of dollars in support of local and national charitable causes. Jess was a founding member of the Family Winemakers of California, and in 2009 was inducted into the Vintners Hall of Fame. Kendall Jackson Wine Estates remains one of the world's most awarded wineries. Jess Jackson's legacy of high quality in everything he did and unflinching compromise in all that he undertook will live on and serve as an example for all of us for many years to come. Jess Jackson leaves behind his wife, Barbara Banke, 5 children, as well as 2 grandchildren. To say there will never be another Jess Jackson is an understatement for sure.
Mr.
Members,
Allen?
please join me in adjourning in Jess Jackson's memory.
Mr. Allen.
Joining with Assemblymember Chesbro, Jess Jackson was a giant of the wine industry, but the most significant thing about Mr. Jackson was the fact that he paid it forward to the community. He literally organized millions upon millions of dollars of charity to the food banks, to the schools, to the symphony. He was a pillar of our community. He will be missed, and he was truly a leader in the wine industry for many, many years. And I request that we adjourn in his memory.
Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, I rise to request that we adjourn in memory of Dr. Alfred Friedman, who died last Sunday, April 17th, of complications from surgery to treat a fractured hip. Dr. Friedman was a former president of the American Psychiatric Association, and in 1973, he played a key role in ending the classification of homosexuality as a mental illness. Dr. Friedman became president of the association, eking out a narrow victory of 3 votes out of more than 9,100 members during a controversial time in the APA's history, where a deep division between those clamoring for social activism and those supporting a more conservative view had occurred. After becoming president, Dr. Friedman enlisted Columbia University psychiatrist Dr. Robert Spitzer to head a task force studying the issue of homosexuality, and when Spitzer proposed a resolution to stop calling homosexuality an illness, Friedman offered his hearty endorsement. This resolution passed unanimously by the APA's Board of Trustees, along with board support for legislation to protect gays from discrimination, which became a watershed moment in the civil rights movement for LGBT folks. Dr. Friedman understood that it was his organization's duty to speak out on the controversial treatment of gay men and lesbians, stating, quote, "At the time, that discussion was the most important thing we had accomplished," end quote. He understood that the long road to equality had to start with their refusal to classify homosexuality as an illness. Dr. Friedman was 94 years of age, and our thoughts and prayers are with his families, and I ask you to join me in adjourning in his memory today. Thank you.
Ms. Butler.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I am adjourning today in memory of Sidney Harmon, who died recently at the age of 92. Mr. Harmon was the husband of Congresswoman Jane Harmon, was a man of many accomplishments in business, the arts, government, and he most recently brought Newsweek magazine and oversaw its merger with the Daily Beast. In business, Mr. Harmon was the founder of Harmon International Industries, a stereo maker based in Washington, D.C., and his work there began in 1953 and is described as pioneering and innovative, starting the first home audio receiver, which he developed with Mr. Bernard Carden. Mr. Harmon put forward a management and labor relations philosophy that included workers in the formation of policies that has since been a case study used in business schools. As a supporter of the arts, Mr. Harmon donated some $20 million in 2007 to build a new home for Washington's popular Shakespeare Theater. He commented at the time that it is, quote, critical to encourage the creation of new expressions of all in the performing arts, and he added that if we do not support the arts, we are going to go culturally bankrupt. And in government, Mr. Harmon served as the Deputy Commerce Secretary under President Jimmy Carter. My condolences to Congresswoman Jane Harmon, and I ask that we adjourn in his memory today. Thank you.
And Ms. Lowenthal.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I rise to adjourn in memory of Bob Epple, in part because, like many people from the greater Long Beach region, I have admiration and gratitude to someone who gave so much of himself for so many years to serve the community in many different roles, the latest being as a board member for Cerritos College. But I also rise out of a sense of duty to this institution to acknowledge the passing of a former member, someone who conducted business on this floor just as we're doing today. It's very appropriate that the Assembly adjourn for a prior member to mark with dignity the life of former Assemblyman Bob Epple, who served here from 1988 to 1994 and who died April 13th at the age of 62. Thank you, members.
Thank you, members. Please bring the names to the desk to be printed in the journal. The session schedule is as follows: Tuesday, April 26th, check-in session; Wednesday, April 27th, check-in session; Thursday, April 28th, floor session at 9 a.m. All other items remaining will be passed and retained. All motions shall be continued. I'm ready to entertain a motion to adjourn. Mr. Calderon moves. Ms. Conway seconds. This House stands adjourned until Thursday, April 28th at 9 a.m. Quorum call is lifted.